Anti-colonial upsurge, peasant and tribal revolts. British East India Company was formed in the year 1600. It entered into India with the prime objective of establishing relations with India and to earn profits. During the period between 1605 and 1740, East India Company followed the policy of consolidation of their trade in various parts of the country. Policy of consolidation of their trade. At the same time, it also closely observed the activities of the native rulers. The death of the Aurangzeb in the internal in 1707 provided them a chance to interfere in the internal politics of the native rulers. After the year 1740, it followed the policy of divide and rule against the native rulers. Policy of divide and rule against native rulers. After 1740, then Robert Clive established its sway over Bengal, defeating Siraj Uddaulah and the Bengal uh, Anwar and his successors in the Mir Qasim, Mir Qasim in the Battle of Plassey and Buxar in 1764. Similarly, the dynamic and patriotic attempts of Hyder Ali and Tippu Sultan of Mysore state, it failed in stopping the East India Company's success. The defeat and fall of Hyder Ali and Tippu Sultan by the year 1799 made East India Company the master of Mysore. So the conquest of Bengal and Mysore between 57 and 79 made East India Company a powerful political organization in India. The Regulating Act of 1772 and 73 and the advent of governor general rule over the company's conquered area in India really made East India Company a real ruler. The administrative, okay, the military, external and the revenue policies, administrative policies, military policies, external policies and revenue policies of the English governor generals between 73 and 1856. It dealt a crushing blow to the supreme authority of the native rulers and the public. So the company's rule provided a curse to all the sections of the society. Indian natural resources passed into the control of the company. India became a colony and a raw material exporter to England. The oppressive company rule and its cruel treatment affected the life of the native people. The condition of the peasantry became miserable. So the seminars who got zamindars who got land revenue collection rights during the Lord Cornwallis period. They followed oppressive policy against the local peasants. Even the zamindars also who got the land revenue rights, they also followed oppressive policy. The entry of the factory made English textiles crushed the native weavers' lives. The forest policy very important of the company. It affected the lifestyle of the tribals of the land. So they lost their rights, their independence, their wealth, their culture was affected due to the company's laws. Okay, so forest policy wala their rights, their independence and their wealth and their culture was affected. Then during the pre-sepoy revolt period mundu, the native rulers who have lost their kingdoms, the peasants who had lost their lands and the princes who have lost their pensions and the tribals who were deprived of their age old exploitation of the forest laws, tribals who were deprived of their rights with the age old exploitation of the forest laws and the wealth raised anti-British revolts in the it raised anti-British revolts, okay, in the various parts of the country. Historians have described these anti-colonial and anti-imperialistic attempts by the native people and groups as the peasant and tribal revolts. It is necessary here to know that about the factors. We have to know about the factors that led to the outbreak of the anti-British peasant and tribal revolts before the outbreak of the actual 1857 Sepoy revolt. So what are the political factors? Political factors: the Mughal emperors, who had ruled large parts of India before the advent of the East India Company, has enjoyed the confidence of various sections of Indian society. Okay, Mughal rulers, I had enjoyed confidence of various sections of Indian society. The Mughal emperors used to listen to the grievances of their subjects in a regular manner, but the East India Company administrators, they scrapped this practice. This caused a great dissatisfaction in various sections, especially the capture for Bengal and Mysore by Robert Clive and Wellesley respectively, by following all possible corrupt and unethical tactics. Corrupt and unethical tactics created great anger in the heart of the native people. The land revenue policies of the company grievously affected the condition of the Indian peasants. The permanent land revenue settlement అనేది it became a golden goose to the company and a curse to the native farmers. The Indian peasants were seriously affected due to the illegal practices of the company officials and zamindars. They were seriously affected due to illegal practices of the company officials and zamindars. The Indian peasants' life became miserable. Indian rural economy was seriously affected. The money lenders, they collected huge amount of money from farmers in the form of interest. Okay, then this was the political factors. Okay, in the from Mughal emperors. Then economic and financial factors. The East India Company officials between 1757 and 1857, they followed an aggressive and selfish policy of economic imperialism. Okay, aggressive and selfish policy of economic imperialism. They became the masters of Bengal and Mysore before defeating the native rulers. This made them sole masters of the natural resources of these areas. So the forest laws and the land revenue policies became unbearable to the tribes and peasants. As a result, these local tribals and peasantry, they lost their age old rights and livelihood. So these new laws of East India Company also polluted the socio-religious and economic lifestyle of the peasants and tribals. The newly emerged zamindars, they pressed the Indian peasantry with heavy and burdensome land tax. Okay, land tax. So in addition to these man-made blunders, nature in the form of famines and droughts also further affected the lives of these sections. So very little assistance was extended to the drought hit area and of the farmers by the company officials. So this type of pathetic conditions forced the peasants and tribals to revolt against the company administration. So similarly, the policy of mercantilism and free trade, policy of mercantilism, okay, and the policy of free trade, it destroyed the Indian village and cottage industries and the handicrafts. So this has further destroyed the economic position of the peasants. So at the entry of the British made factory made products into the Indian market reduced the demand for the native products. So this proved a great loss to the Indian handicrafts and the professional products, and they lost income. Their lives became miserable. The age old Indian professional classes, age-old Indian professional classes were seriously affected due to the policy of the mercantilism and the free trade policy. This also increased the pressure on the agricultural sector. Majority of them became agricultural laborers. దగ్గర land లేదు కాబట్టి they became agricultural laborers. Then landlords enjoyed all types of privileges. The prevailing situation encouraged local peasants to revolt in their own way against the company rule and its policies. Company rule and its policies. All these attempts made the peasants and the tribals suppressed by the company officials. The rise of anti-British feeling among the tribals. ఎలా రైజ్ అయింది ఇప్పుడు పొలిటికల్ ఫ్యాక్టర్స్ అండ్ ఎకనామిక్ ఫ్యాక్టర్స్ చూసాం కదా. Now we'll see rise of anti-British feeling amongst the tribals. The tribals are one of the important sections of the Indian population since British times. They lived in forest and hilly regions, and they depended to great extent on the forest wealth and forest produce for their livelihood. They maintained isolation from the village or the urban life since ages. They preserved their rich culture for many centuries. They are hardworking and honest. Among the important tribals of India before 1857, there are కోలీస్, దట్ ఈస్ మరాఠాలో ఉన్నారంట వాళ్ళు, కోలీస్ అంట వాళ్ళు. ఒక్క నిమిషం. సి కోలీస్, దట్ ఈస్ మరాఠాస్. అండ్ తమల్ చీకో బొగాతా, that is Chota Nagpur. Tamal Chico Bogata, Chota Nagpur. Menti, Assam. Kol, Bihar. Nayak, Gujarat. Kond, Orissa. Santals, Bihar. So Kol and Santals are from Bihar, and Gonds, Koya, and Hill Reddis, Kondaridlu from Telangana. Gond, Koyas, and Hill Reddis in Telangana stand specific and prominent. They took part actively in the anti-colonial struggle before 1857. The company laws reduced the independence of the tribals. Company laws reduced the independence of the tribals. They lost many rights and privileges. The traditional Tanda head, వాళ్ళకి తండాలు అంటాం కదా వాళ్ళ గ్రూప్స్ని, the traditional Tanda heads were removed from their position, and non-tribal community people like Sikhs and Muslims also were appointed as పెత్తందార్స్. పెత్తందార్లు అంటాం కదా, తండా హెడ్స్ నేమో రిమూవ్ చేశారు. దే రిమూవ్ ది తండా హెడ్స్, అండ్ సిక్స్ అండ్ ముస్లిమ్స్ who were non-tribal community, they were appointed as pettandars. So this led to the revolt of Kols Bihar. During the revolt of the Kols during 1839 and 32, the Kols of Orissa used to perform human sacrifices. See, the Kols of Orissa used to perform human sacrifices and infanticide as a practice of their social custom. The company passed laws abolishing this system in 1846. 1846 లో పాస్ చేసింది. This was opposed by the Khons. ఈ కోల్స్ అనేవాళ్ళు, కోన్స్ ద కోన్స్ అనుకుంటా, ద కోంద్ ఉన్నారు కదా, కోంద్ of Orissa, they used to perform human sacrifices and infanticides as a practice of their social custom. Okay, so the company passed laws abolishing the system in 1846. So this was opposed by the Khons. So the ruler of Bodh Som Bisai, the ruler of Bodh Som Bisai అనే అతను, okay, he led this revolt against the atrocities committed by the non-tribal people on Santals of Bihar. And the Santal revolt also broke during 1855. The Santal revolt, it broke during 1855 and 1856. ఓకే, సంతాల్స్ ఆఫ్ బీహార్కి అగెయిన్స్ట్గా కమిట్ చేసిన అట్రాసిటీస్కి కూడా నాన్ ట్రైబల్ అఫీషియల్స్ ఎవరైతే సంతాల్స్కి అగెయిన్స్ట్గా ఉన్నారో, ది కమిటెడ్ అట్రాసిటీ. సో వాళ్ళకి సంతాల్ రివోల్ట్ చేశారు 1855-56. ద రూలర్ ఆఫ్ కోన్స్ రూలర్ వచ్చి బోధ్ సోమ్ బిసాయ్. So then anti-colonial peasant revolts are done. Due to the establishment of the colonial rule over India, the Indian peasantry were seriously affected, especially the peasants of Bengal, Bihar and central India and some parts of the southern India. They lost their rights on the agricultural land. They lost their rights. So the British land revenue, the selfish land revenue policy of the British administrators, it caused a great damage to the Indian peasants. Okay, so as a result, in some parts of India, peasants led anti-colonial revolts before 1857. Here is a brief attempt is made to highlight some of them. First వచ్చి the revolt of Raja Chait Singh. Revolt of Raja Chait Singh అంట. So the Raja Chait Singh was the eldest son of Balwant Singh. Balwant Singh's eldest son. He succeeded to the throne of Banaras in the year 1770. The Nawab of Awadh Okay, Nawab of Awadh was forced by the company officials to recognize Chet Singh as the Jamindar in 1773, but the interference and the domination of the company authorities forced Raja Chet Singh to revolt against the British Wala domination and Wala interference. His army was defeated and the zamindari was confiscated by Warren Hastings, and it was given to Chet Singh's nephew Raja Mahadeep Narayan Singh in September. Raja Mahadeep Narayan Singh in September 1781. At last, he lost his life in March 1810 at Gwalior fighting with the company forces. It is significant to note that the peasants of Banaras supported this revolt of their king. Okay, Raja Chet Singh, son of Balwant Singh, throne of Banaras. Nawab of Awadh was forced by company officials after the battle of Buxar to recognize Chet Singh as the Zamindar. Even though he accepted, the interference and domination of company officials made Raja Chet Singh to revolt. Then Warren Hastings, he had suppressed the revolt. Warren Hastings of revolt of Chet Singh, and Raja Mahadeep Narayan Singh was appointed, and so even the peasants of Banaras supported this revolt of their king. Then peasants revolt of Rangapur, Bengal, Rangapur. After the conquest of Bengal by the company, the peasants of Bengal, okay, felt insecure. వాళ్ళు బెంగాల్ కాంక్వెస్ట్ చేశాక పెజెంట్స్ ఆఫ్ బెంగాల్ ఫెల్ట్ ఇన్సెక్యూర్. ఇన్ ద ఇయర్ 1783, the peasants of Rangapur in the northern districts of the Bengal, they led an open revolt against the oppressive and the unjust attitude and the unjust policy of the company, and the policy of the company appointed revenue collectors. Okay, the oppressive policies of the company appointed revenue collectors, the contractors, and the officials. So, especially Debi Singh, okay, especially Debi Singh, the revenue collector of Rangapur and Dinajpur districts, okay, was very oppressive and towards the local peasants. He unleashed a reign of terror in the villages of the above districts, Rangapur and Dinajpur. The request made by the local peasants to the company officials also failed. Requests made by local peasants to company authorities. As a result, the peasants belonging to all sections united and organized a revolt against Debi Singh's atrocities. Okay, they also elected their own leader, whom they called as Nawab. So they raised a huge army. They attacked the local kachri and a court of law. A court of lawని అటాక్ చేశారంట, and they looted the grain stores and forcibly released all the prisoners. They forcibly released all the prisoners, and the Hindu Muslim unity was exhibited by the peasants. Hindu Muslim unity, it was exhibited so by the peasants. So they looted the grain stores, forcibly released all the prisoners, and they attacked the local kachari, that is a court of law. They had a leader called as Nawab. They raised a huge army against the Debi Singh's atrocities. They stopped paying all the taxes. They stopped paying all the taxes of all types and the revenue demands to the collectors. Okay, they had stopped paying the taxes and the revenue demands to the collector pay చేయడం ఆపేశారు. They started their own government, and they, very important, they started their own government and they levied charges to meet the costs of their movement. వాళ్ళే లివై చేసుకున్నారు charges to meet the cost of their movement. The movement lasted for only 1 year, nearly 1 year. Finally, Devi Singh requested the military assistance of the company administration. Then Warren Hastings sent troops to secure Devi Singh. As a result, the Rangpur peasants' revolt was brutally suppressed by the end of 1783. Much before 1857 revolt, it suppressed in 1783. So the peasant revolt of Rangpur. Then Palasi Raja revolt of Malabar. So the oppressive land revenue laws of the companies were challenged. Oppressive land revenue laws of the company were challenged by an open revolt under the leadership of the Palasi Raja by the peasants and the peasants of Kerala in 1796 and 1805. The company with its strong army it suppressed it. Velu Thambi, the prime minister of the he was the prime minister of the Travancore state. Okay, Velu Thambi, he was the prime minister of the Travancore state, also led the revolt with the support of a large army of the professional soldiers and peasants against the company appointed revenue officials. But all these revolts were put down by the British army. So in some cases the company tried to follow the lenient revenue policy in some cases, and after this it tried to follow lenient రెవెన్యూ పాలసీస్ కూడా ట్రై చేశారు వాళ్ళు. ద రివోల్ట్ ఆఫ్ దస్నామీ సన్యాసీస్ దస్నామీ సన్యాసీస్ అండ్ మదరీ ఫకీర్స్ of Bengal and Bihar, famously known as Sannyasi Revolt. This is called as Sannyasi Revolt. In most of the anti-colonial peasant revolts of the pre-1857 era, peasant revolts of pre-1857 era, the religion అనేది it played an important role in providing a discursive, okay, filled with within which the peasants understood the colonial rule and conceptualized resistance. వాళ్ళు కాన్సెప్షువలైజ్ చేసుకున్నారు రెసిస్టెన్స్ ఎలా చేయాలి అని. దే అండర్స్టూడ్ ద కొలోనియల్ రూల్ అండ్ దే కాన్సెప్షువలైజ్ ది రెసిస్టెన్స్. ఇన్ అదర్ వర్డ్స్, their religion defined their ideology of protest. ఇప్పుడు రిలీజియన్ బట్టి they had defined their ideology of protest. The earliest of these was the Sannyasi revolt. It was the Sannyasi revolt and the Fakir rebellion. Sannyasi and Fakir rebellion which rocked the northern Bengal and adjacent areas of the Bihar between 73 and 1800. The Dasnami Sannyasis, known for their martial arts తెలిసిన వాళ్ళు అంటారు దస్నామీ సన్యాసిస్, also owned some land holdings. Okay, so they were active in money lending and trades. See, Dasnami sannyasis, martial tradition, they also had land holdings and they were active in money lending and trades. So similarly, Madari fakirs, they enjoyed rent-free tenures during the rent-free ఉండేదంట tenures during the period of the Mughal rule. But the East India Company officials demanded high revenue and abolished their rent-free tenures, and they imposed many restrictions on their trades. వాళ్ళు చేసే ట్రేడ్స్ మీద దే ఇంపోజ్డ్ రెస్ట్రిక్షన్స్ అంట. సో ది కంపెనీ అథారిటీస్ వాంట్ ఇంపోజ్ బ్యాన్ ఆన్ ది మూవ్మెంట్ ఆఫ్ ది ఆర్మ్డ్ మాంక్స్. వీళ్ళు దే వాంటెడ్ టు the company wanted to impose a ban on the armed monks అని చెప్తున్నారు. So as a result, the struggle between the sannyasi and fakirs and company authorities became inevitable, and it was crushed by the company by 1800. So this is Sannyasi revolt 1863 to 1800. Then the revolt of the peasants at Nagar at Mysore 1830-31. The Mysore state was occupied by the East India Company after defeating its ruler Tipu Sultan in the year 1799. The old ruling dynasty was reinstalled on the throne. As a result, the peasants of the Mysore were forced to pay enhanced land revenue. Okay, enhanced land revenue pay చేయమన్నారు peasantsని. So the rampant extortion by corrupt revenue officers further affected the living condition of the peasants. As a result, the peasants of the Nagar province openly revolted against the Mysore rulers in 1830-31. In 1830-31, so this was the revolt, but the revolt of peasants was crushed by the Mysore ruler. Okay, Mysore ruler అంట వాడు చిక్క వడయార్ రాజు ఒక అతను ఉన్నాడు కదా, చిక్క కృష్ణరాజా టు of Vadaya dynasty. He crushed the revolts with the help of the British army. So besides the above discussed peasant revolts and some other revolts also challenged the company's oppressive land revenue system. The Farezi movement led by the Hazi Shariatullah Farezi Farezi movement. Hazi Shariatullah, religious leader in the eastern Bengal, was also fully supported by the peasants. He led a struggle against the local landlords and the local landlords and revenue officials till his death in 1839. His son, Dudu Mian, Dudu Mia, Dudu Dudu Mia అతని పేరు హాజీ షరియతుల్లా Dudu Mia. Okay, Dudu Mia also continued the fight against the zamindars and planters till 1840 and 1850. But the mighty army of the company crushed his attempts also. He died in 1862. The Moplas or the Maipias, Mopla revolt of the Malabar region, and అక్కడ కూడా peasants revolted against the East India Company's unjust land revenue policy. Malabar was captured by the East India Company in 1792లోనే మలబార్ రీజన్ని క్యాప్చర్ చేసేసారంట. The Moplas were the descendants of the Arab traders who settled in the Malabar region. They had married local Nair and Tiyar women. Okay, local Hindu women, Nair and Tiyar women, descendants of Arabs పెళ్లి చేసుకుంటే మోప్లాస్ అనేవాళ్ళు దే హ్యాడ్ ఒరిజినేటెడ్ అక్కడే. సో they adopted agriculture as their chief occupation since the pre-British times. Among them, cultivating tenants, landless laborers, petty traders and fishermen were large number. ఎవరెవరు వాళ్ళే కల్టివేట్ చేసి అంటే కౌల్దారులు, కల్టివేటింగ్ టెనెంట్స్, ల్యాండ్లెస్ లేబరర్స్, దెన్ petty traders and fishermen were large number. In the year 1843, okay, 1843, East India Company brought the Slavery Act అని ఒకటి తెచ్చింది. దిస్ ఎమాన్సిపేటెడ్ ది చా చామర్స్ అనేవాళ్ళు ఎవరు స్లేవ్ క్యాస్ట్ అంట. సో దిస్ emancipated the charmers, a slave caste. So this gave a scope to the social problems in Malabar. Slavery Abolition Act 1843, charmers అనేవాళ్ళు దే వర్ ఎమాన్సిపేటెడ్ అంటే పైకి తీసుకొచ్చారు వాళ్ళని స్లేవ్ క్యాస్ట్ని. సోషల్ ప్రాబ్లమ్స్ ఇన్ మలబార్. The British, after the conquest of Malabar in 1792, it disturbed the traditional agrarian system. అక్కడున్న ట్రెడిషనల్ అగ్రేరియన్ సిస్టమ్ని డిస్టర్బ్ చేశారు. దే క్రియేటెడ్ ఇండివిజువల్ ఓనర్షిప్ రైట్ ఇన్ ద ల్యాండ్. ఓకే, అక్కడ ఉన్న ట్రెడిషనల్ సిస్టమ్ని తీసేసి ఇండివిజువల్ ఓనర్షిప్ రైట్ ఇన్ ద ల్యాండ్ని క్రియేట్ చేశారు. ద ట్రెడిషనల్ సిస్టమ్ స్టిప్యులేటెడ్ అండ్ ఈక్వల్ షేరింగ్ ఆఫ్ ది నెట్ ప్రొడ్యూస్ ఆఫ్ ది ల్యాండ్ బై ద జన్మీ అంటే హోల్డర్ ఆఫ్ ది జన్మం టెన్యూర్. ఓకే, హోల్డర్ హూ ఈస్ ద జన్మీ అంటే హీస్ ది హోల్డర్ ఆఫ్ ది జన్యం టెన్యూర్. ద కనందార్ ఆర్ ది కనక్కరం హూ ఈస్ ది హోల్డర్ ఆఫ్ ది కనం టెన్యూర్. సో అండ్ ది కల్టివేటర్. సో అక్కడ ఇంతకుముందు ఎలా ఉండేదంటే, సో జన్మి, కనందార్, కనక్కరం అండ్ కల్టివేటర్స్ వీళ్ళందరూ కలిసి నెట్ ప్రొడ్యూస్ని ఈక్వల్గా పీపుల్ అందరూ షేర్ చేసేవాళ్ళు. అండ్ దట్ వాస్ ది ట్రెడిషనల్ అగ్రేరియన్ సిస్టమ్. సో వీళ్ళు వచ్చి ఇండివిజువల్ ఓనర్షిప్ రైట్స్ ఇచ్చారు. బట్ ద బ్రిటిష్ ఇన్ ద మలబార్ రిజెక్టెడ్ ది అబౌవ్ అరేంజ్మెంట్. దెన్ it recognized the Janmi as the absolute owners of the land. This caused a great loss to the interest of the Kanamdar and the cultivator. So the local police and the judiciary also supported the company. As a result, the peasants revolted against the unjust revenue laws. A series of such incidents occurred in Malabar throughout 19th century. By the year 1852, the company forces succeeded in suppressing the Mopla revolt. But after 1870, Moplas once again revolted against the British laws. After 1870 also, even though the above present rebellions described and its failure and they have failed in achieving their goal of overthrowing the British or its supporting and systems and or its supporting sectionsని ఓవర్త్రో చేయడంలో ఫెయిల్ అయినా, they stood as an inspiration to the post 1857 peasant revolts. They stood as an inspiration to post 1857 peasant revolts. Tribal revolts. East India Company's authority was established in most parts of the north and the central India between 1757 to 1857. The rule of company was oppressive. It affected various sections of the people, including the tribals. As a result, the tribals revolted against the company rule. The Kolis of Maharashtra first revolted in 1784 and 85. Similarly, in 89, the Tamil tribal community people and Tamil tribal community people of Chota Nagpura. Tamil and tribal community people of Chota Nagpur region revolted against the company oppressive laws. During the years 1800, 1817 and 1832, the Chero Bogata tribals of Chota Nagpur, okay, Chota Nagpur and Chota Nagpur, Palamau region, Chero, Bogata tribals of Chota Nagpur and the Palamau region revolted against the British Raj. The Cheros revolted against the Takura, who they thought had colluded with the British against the interests of the tribals. So, outbreak of the 1857 revolt encouraged the tribals of the Palamau, Ranchi, Hazaribagh to revolt against the atrocities of the British officials and their supporting Indians. In the forthcoming pages, an attempt is made to highlight the significant tribal revolts like the Bill, the Ramosi, and the Kond revolt of 1846-48 and the Santal revolt of 1855 and 56. First demo bills. Bill revolt of 1817 and 1824-25. ఎన్నిసార్లు చేశారు వీళ్ళు? ఫస్ట్ ఏమో 1818లో చేశారంట. ఓకే, తర్వాత 1824-25లో, తర్వాత 1831లో, తర్వాత 1846లో. ఓకే, ఎవ్రీ నియర్లీ 15 years వన్స్ చేస్తూనే ఉన్నారు. ఇక్కడేమో 15 years, ఇక్కడేమో మళ్ళీ 5 years, ఇక్కడేమో మళ్ళీ 15 years. ద బిల్స్ అండ్ aboriginal tribe that lived in the western ghats with their stronghold ఎక్కడ ఉండే ఖాందేశ్ అనే ప్లేస్లో ఉన్నారంట బిల్స్ అనేవాళ్ళు. Okay, they revolted in the years 1817 and 19 against the oppressive rule of the company officials. The Governor General Marquis Hastings అనేవాడు, he tried to suppress this revolt. The company blamed Peshwa Bajirao II and his commander-in-chief Trayambakji Danglia for encouraging the Bill tribesmen against the company rule. The Bills lost their agricultural land. They lost their agricultural land due to the company's policies. The Bills got terrified with the British armed forces. The British officials between 1824, 25, 31 and again in the year 1846, they dispatched large number of forces to suppress the Bills. The Sevaram led the Bill revolt. Sevaram ane atana, he led the Bill revolt. This encouraged other sections of the people also. Next other revolt వచ్చి Ramosi, another important forest tribe which opposed the company rule was Ramosis of the Western Ghats. Again, Bills of Western Ghats and Ramosis of Western Ghats, they revolted in the year 1822. Their leader was Chittur Singh. So he plundered the region around Satara with his tribesmen. Satara ekkadundi Maharashtralo, along with his tribesmen. So the Ramosis also revolted against the company rule in 1826 and 1829. 22 lo ఒకసారి చేశారు, 26 and 29. So the British forces suppressed their attempts. The Kol revolt 1831-32. The Kol tribes of Chota Nagpur Plateau and Singham, Palamau and Hazaribagh. Chota Nagpur ఒకటి, సింగం, Palamau, Hazaribagh. They led a heroic struggle against the British policies. Before the year 1831 and 32, the headmen, that is Munda, the headmen ante Mundas of the Kol tribe, they enjoyed certain land and the absolute rights, కొన్ని land rights and absolute land rights over the people of the Kols అన్నమాట. కోల్స్ ఎక్కడ వాళ్ళు? బీహార్. But the British officials removed the Mundas and headmen from their position and appointed their own loyal men from the non-tribal groups like the Sikh and Muslims. The decision of these officials was oppressed by the Kols. The interference of the company officials in their socio-religious and the hereditary rights of the Coles forced them to revolt um, at once in 1831 and 32. 1831-32లో చేశారు. ది oppressive method of the land revenue collection tribes దగ్గర కూడా తీసుకున్నారంట by the non-coal officials. It also encouraged the coals to attack and burn the public property. They attacked and they burnt the public property. The coals plundered and looted many villages. In the violence, large number of non-tribal people were killed by the coals. As a result, the East India Company officials started military action on the coals. By March 1832, large number of coals were brutally killed by the company armed forces. The revolt was suppressed by the company officials with the superior army and strategy. Even though the coals failed in achieving their ultimate goal, their revolt stood as an inspiration to the future tribal revolts. Then Kond revolt. The Konds are the native tribals of the Kandmal hills and Kandmal hills of broad region of Orissa. ఓకే. కందమాల్ హిల్స్ ఆఫ్ బ్రాడ్ రీజన్ ఆఫ్ ఒరిస్సా నుంచి కోన్స్ వచ్చారు. సిన్స్ అ లాంగ్ టైమ్ దే యూస్ టు పర్ఫార్మ్ సర్టెన్ ఆర్థడాక్స్ ఆర్థడాక్స్ సోషల్ రిచువల్స్ లైక్ హ్యూమన్ సాక్రిఫైస్ అండ్ ఇన్ఫాంటిసైడ్స్. బట్ after the conquest of Orissa by the company, its officials made new laws prohibiting these activities. The Khons lived in large number in the Boad and Dispalla areas. The local rulers of Orissa agreed to abolish. Okay, they agreed to abolish the human sacrifices and the child sacrifices from 1837 onwards under the pressure of the company officials. So this has generated great anger in the Kondh against the local rulers and also company administrators. In the year 1843, Major Hick Major Hicks was appointed as the commander of the company forces again stationed at Kurda and Balasore. నిన్న అక్కడికే వచ్చింది కదా బాలాసోర్ దగ్గరికి ఈ యాస్ తుఫాన్. Okay, so they were stationed. The commander was Major Hicks, stationed at the Kurda and Balasore in order to suppress the Kond revolt. But Major Hicks failed in getting absolute support of the local rulers. The Konds refused to pay the land revenue to the company. They also refused to obey and recognize the ruler of board as their master. రూలర్ ఆఫ్ బోర్డ్ని వాళ్ళ మాస్టర్గా వాళ్ళు యాక్సెప్ట్ కూడా చేయని అనేసారంట. In July 1845, East India Company officials they established Meria Agency to stop the human sacrifices and the female infanticide evils that prevailed in the Khons. So Major McPherson అనే ఆయన he was assigned the task of pacifying the Khons to obey the government laws. Major McPherson, okay, he conducted a series of meetings, okay, with these people. He released large number of Khons who were arrested earlier by them, but all those efforts failed completely in winning the confidence of Khond. In 1846, the Khons made a sudden attack on the camp of the Major McPherson and they imprisoned nearly 170 soldiers. They also tried to release their ruler who was in the control of the Major McPherson. Then in April 1846, the company officials stationed Madras contingent force at both, and the Khons resisted them with their traditional weapons like the axes and the bow and arrow. The company's armed forces won the battle against the Khons, but most of the Khons escaped into the nearby forest. After the end of the rainy season, they returned to open area and again revolted under their leader Chakra Bisai. Then పేరేం చక్ర బిసాయ్ and against the company forces. Then Gumsur became the center. It became the center for their struggle. Then the fight between the company forces and Chakra Bisai lasted for more than 2 years. The company forces finally succeeded in suppressing the Kond revolt by adopting all the positive methods. Then Sambisai, Chakra Bisai తర్వాత Sam Bisai, the Bodh ruler. చక్ర బిసాయ్ తర్వాత శామ్ బిసాయ్ అంట. Both ruler reinstalled as the he was Sam beside the both ruler, he was reinstalled as the king of goths, and but Chakra Bisai continued his struggle in secret guerrilla method to to achieve his men's rights. In 1855 also once again Cones revolted, but it was crushed by the company forces. So slowly the Cones gave up their practices of human sacrifices and the female infanticide. Santal Revolt 1855-56. In the history of Indian tribals of post mutiny 1855 తర్వాత 1857 తర్వాత Santal Revolt of 1855-56, it received a special place in the history. Santali are the native tribal people of the Rajmahal Hills and Bhagalpur in Bihar. Rajmahal Hills and Bhagalpur in Bihar. Bhagalpur is Silkonla adi. So they revolted against the ill treatment at the hands of the revenue officials of the company. The revenue officials collected extra land revenue from the Santals. Their oppressive attitude caused great damage to the Santals. The local landlords, money lenders, are also exploited the innocent Santals. The local police and the zamindars and the revenue tax collectors, all these treated Santals in a harsh and humiliating manner. In the year 1845 also, Santals made an attempt to put an end to the oppressive rule of the company. Okay, company officials, they looted during the night time. Looted during the night time the wealth of the zamindars. On 30th June 1855, the Santals held a meeting at బాగనిధి బాగనిధి అనే ప్లేస్లో మీటింగ్ పెట్టుకున్నారంటే 1855లో. ఇట్ వాస్ వెల్ అటెండెడ్ బై 600 ట్రైబల్ ఆఫ్ నియర్లీ 400 villages. In this meeting they decided to fight unitedly against the different atrocities of the company officials and their loyalists. The historic Santal revolt was historically led by the dynamic Santal leaders like the Sidhu and Kanhu. Sidhu and Kanhu were the dynamic Santal leaders. This inspired the tribals of villages to participate in the war of the independence. In the first war of independence లో పార్టిసిపేట్ చేయడానికి ఇదే వీళ్ళని ఇన్స్పైర్ చేసింది అంటున్నారు. సో దే క్రియేటెడ్ దేర్ ఓన్ ఆర్మ్డ్ ఫోర్స్. Okay, and they attacked the government officials and the zamindars at the Birbhum, Rajmahal and Bhagalpur. The houses of the white officials, police officials and the railway employees were attacked. White officials, police officials and the railway employees were attacked. Their families and children were brutally killed. The non-tribals also extended their support to the Santals. Very good. Sidhu and Kanhu led the anti-British struggle in the most positive way. They scored some victories over the English forces. Finally, the East India Company used all its army and its commanders and money, etc., to create the disorder among the Santals. More than 5,000 Santals were killed. As a result of the false trick, Sidhu was arrested and killed. ఒక false trick చేయడం వల్ల Sidhu was arrested and killed. In February 1856, another Santali leader Kanhu was also imprisoned by the company armies. With this arrest, the Santal revolt lost its rhythm and effect. The Rajmahal and the Birbhum districts passed into the control of the company rule. Now, tribal revolts in Andhra. The tribals of Telugu speaking areas of the Madras presidency also got affected due to the oppressive land revenue policies of the company officials. As a result, they revolted against the company's authority. In Vishakhapatnam, the Vishakhapatnam tribal revolt. The Vishakhapatnam tribal revolt and the Rampa rebellion of 1879 are the popular tribal revolts in the Telugu speaking areas of the Madras presidency. The Vishakhapatnam tribal revolt. The tribal people of Vishakhapatnam region revolted against the new laws of the British government in the year 1832. The policy of isolation, while isolated policy of isolation and indirect rule pursued by the British rulers were with regard to the administration of the tribal areas, it led to a series of the revolt. By the close of 1832 law, disturbances in the seminaries of Kasipuram, Paika Raupet, Palakondalu of the present day Srikakulam district, and the Parlakimedi Zamindar of the Ganjam became so serious that George Russell George Russell, the first member of the Board of Revenue of Madras government, he sent special commissioner to investigate the causes of the disturbances, to suggest measures for putting down the lawlessness in the hilly tract. On his advice, Act 24 of 1839 was passed, which placed 7/8 of the district 7 by 8 part of the district beyond the operation of the ordinary law, and instead it was administered directly by the collector, who was vested with the extraordinary powers. Okay, so even after this Act 24 of 1839 was implemented, further troubles or outbreaks, okay, called పితూరీస్, లోకల్గా దాన్ని ఏమనేవాళ్ళు, అవుట్ బ్రేక్స్ని పితూరీస్ అనేవాళ్ళు. అంటే ఇట్ టుక్ ప్లేస్ ఇన్ ది గోల్కొండ హిల్స్ ఇన్ 1845 and 48, 1851, 58, 1879, 80, 1886, 89 in Jaipur Zamindari in 1849, 50, 1856. So among the Savaras of Gunupur, ఏంది కొర్ర కొర్రవనివాలస ఇన్ సాలూరు, ఈ ప్లేసెస్లో అంతా రివోల్ట్ జరిగింది. కొర్రవనివాలస ఇన్ సాలూరు ఇన్ 1900. సవారాస్ ఆఫ్ గునుపూర్ జైపూర్ జమీందారీలో జరిగిందంట. గోల్కొండ హిల్స్. సో ఈవెన్ ఆఫ్టర్ ఆల్ దీస్ యాక్ట్స్ వేర్ దేర్, ఇక్కడంతా మ్యూటినీస్ జరిగాయి అని చెప్తున్నారు. ఓకే, పితూరీస్ అంటున్నారు దాన్ని. జైపూర్ జమీందారీ, గోల్కొండ హిల్స్, కొర్రవని వాలస in Saluru, Savaras of Gurupur. In the Nizam state also, the conditions of the tribals was not good. As the result, the Gond ఉన్నారు కదా, they revolted against the leadership of the Ramji Gond. Under the leadership of Ramji Gond, they revolted, and Komaram Bhim in 1839-40, వీడు కూడా ఒక, ఇప్పుడు ఎన్టీఆర్ ఇదే RRRలో కొమరం భీమ్. Okay, even though the revolts were crushed by the Nizam's army, the heroic fight of the Gonds, okay, Ramji Gond ఒకడు, కొమరం భీమ్, Ramji Gond and Komaram Bhim, they were suppressed by the Nizam's heroic act of the Gonds, and their leaders earned a special place in their hearts of their community. So what is the impact of peasant and tribal revolts? Even though the peasant and the tribal revolts that broke out against the oppressive and the land tenurial policies of the East India Company before 1857 failed in achieving their goal, they made a strong impact on the future policies of the British. Strong impact on future గా వాళ్ళు చేసే పాలసీస్ పైన స్ట్రాంగ్ ఇంపాక్ట్ ఉంది. డ్యూరింగ్ ద టైమ్ ఆఫ్ 1857, revolt in some parts of the country, and peasants joined the sepoys with a desire to overthrow the foreign rule. The British administrators, after the end of the company rule, బ్రిటిష్ వాళ్ళు ఏం చేశారు, బ్రిటిష్ క్రౌన్ రూల్ వాళ్ళు, they tried to control their unnecessary interference in the socio-religious practices of the people దీని ద్వారా. So these peasant revolts became an inspiration for the future peasant revolts led by Gandhiji, such as Champaran Satyagraha, Indigo Farmer Satyagraha, Keda Satyagraha before 1920, and the Indigo Revolt of Bengal, the Pabna Agrarian Revolt of 1870, and the Deccan Riots of 1874, and the Mopla Tenant Revolt of 1921, etc. All these, they demonstrated the spirit to fight against the British unjust and oppressive and unequal agrarian policies, and their drastic draconian and all their drastic and immediate impact were had seen.